Good evening, everybody. My name is Alexandra Nyman, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Soberocity. Soberocity is so much more than a blog. We provide sober events like the one we are hosting tonight, and an opportunity for members to interact with one another on soberocity.com through our wall and also in our Facebook group. Soberocity aims to change the perception of what it means to live a sober life and make it achievable and attainable for anyone who is suffering or who has suffered from addiction. For us, sobriety is a spectrum, and we fully embrace all looking to join our community, for together we are infinitely strong. Tonight's discussion centralizes around the topic of California sober. The great California sober debate was sparked when Demi Lovato remarked in an interview after the release of her documentary series, Dancing with the Devil, that she is California sober. California sober is an approach to recovery that includes drinking alcohol and smoking cannabis in moderation. The purpose of this event is not to discredit anyone's approach to recovery. Soberocity believes that sobriety is a personal journey and that there's no right or wrong way to achieve it. Many people have very strong opinions on this topic, and we would like to use this public forum to voice both sides of the argument in a respectful manner. Now, let's have a word from our panelists. Please introduce yourselves. We'll start with Kaitie, and then we will go to Jake, and then we'll finish up with Jenna. Kaitie, take it away.
Hi, my name is Kaitie. I'm the creator of Sober Saturdays. I guess I'm an advocate for Cali sobriety. And yeah, I'm from Vancouver, Canada.
Very cool. And Jake?
Hi, I'm Jake. I'm the founder of Natural Highs Recovery, and I am tuning in from Santa Cruz, California. I'll be sharing a little bit about my experience with addiction with marijuana.
And Jenna?
Okay. My name is Jenna. I'm in Dallas, Texas, and I don't have a website. I haven't created anything. I've done some sober companioning and sober coaching, but my profession and yeah, I don't have like I am neutral on the subject. I've had addiction in the past, and yeah, I think I'm kind of in between. Open.
Well, very cool. Thank you so much for being here tonight, all of you. So, how did you all decide to become sober, and did you decide to adapt the California lifestyle to your sobriety? This is just grab bag. Cool. Anyone can answer.
So the first question was, how did we become sober?
Yeah,
so my sober journey started back in 2018. Well, I guess even before that. So like I grew up in foster care. My mom and my family members are all struggling or have struggled with addiction in the past, or are currently struggling with addiction tendencies now, with alcohol and other drugs as well. So my whole life I've just kind of been accidentally studying sobriety by watching them. My family isn't very educated. My family didn't have a lot of money. So, I always thought that it was an education or a money thing as to why we were all so addicted, because we just didn't understand and we didn't have the knowledge to get out of it. And so, my whole life I kind of just was always, reaching out to intervention or watching intervention or reading books about addiction or reading self-help books on how to help with mental health. My whole life would just in hopes that I could, help my mom with her addictions, or help my uncles or, my cousins, because it was really intense to watch. Like I just watched them sort of deteriorate my whole life. And there was like a lot of confusion around it. And so as I got older, I worked in the bar and restaurant industry for 10 years. And, my job was kind of to like facilitate parties, bring the drugs to the parties, make sure all the fun people were there so that, other people would want to come and party with us. And just over time, I noticed, because I grew up in addiction, that, we were all having addictive tendencies and we were just dressing it up. And, you know, like my mom, like they didn't start out as struggling addicts, you know, that was something that grew over time. And I knew that I kind of had to do something about it or introduce a different way to include sobriety into bars and restaurants and festival scenes, because lots of my friends are DJs or performers, musicians. They're always in that sort of nightlife, and it can't be avoided because it's their profession. And so when I decided I wanted to cut back on my drinking, I had been like a binge drinker because I had worked in the bars my whole adult life. And when I was still working in the bars, and I noticed that I was having a hard time saying no because like there was just no freaking options in the bars and restaurants. Like I would go, you know, to a club to work, and it was just like there was nothing for me to drink besides like bar orange juice or grenadine. And so like selfishly, I started looking for like alcohol-free products, and that's kind of how I started Sober Saturdays. Was just like I was like, there's got to be something for this classy ass bitch to drink, you know, at a club that isn't freaking grenadine. Like where is the nice stuff? Like I don't understand. And so I started finding all these like beautiful like rose botanicals from Milan, Italy, and all of these like exquisite sort of drinks and stuff at other places. That's like a really nice version of why I got sober. Obviously, there's like a lot of date rape involved and a lot of like really intense like nightlife stories that go along with all that, starting from when I was 18 until I was 26. But yeah, so I struggled with a lot of different things outside of my drinking, and obviously a lot of it was having to do with my abandonment issues growing up. So like I had struggled with eating disorders. I had insomnia, you know, I have undiagnosed ADHD, anxiety, depression. You know, I was trying to go to university for acupuncture, and I just had no support, and I had no one to reach out to. And, you know, I had no idea how to balance all of these things at once. And so that's why, you know, I would try and escape at nighttime and try and make as much money as I could as a woman, you know, which was like at a club. That's just like the quickest way I could do it. And so, yeah, over the years, I was like, when I first quit drinking, I was on a lot of different medications for my depression and anxiety. I was on 5 different pills a day, and I was for, you know, a long time. So was I sober? Yeah. Was I happy? Like, not really, you know? And so I started having these like feelings and like started reading, you know, like I have fibromyalgia. And when I got sober, you know, all my body pain came like really to the forefront. And, you know, like therapy was fine, but like saying the things that traumatized me didn't necessarily help my body to process those traumas. It kind of just like re-traumatized me in a lot of different experiences. And anyway, so I had been reading a lot about like different types of pain therapy. And so I got into reading about psychedelics. Obviously, I found out about ketamine treatments. I found out about like ayahuasca treating addiction. I found out that there was clinics in my area that did things like this. You know, I found a movie called Dosed, which is a movie about a woman in my area who was addicted to heroin for 15 years and got off with one psychedelic treatment. Like,
Oh, wow.
yeah, like it really blew my mind. And it's honestly kind of upsetting to talk about because, you know, my family doesn't know that these medicines exist. You know, they're not legal. There isn't information everywhere about it. And there are people out there and where I am in the world that are struggling with opioids, and these medicines can cure them in like 1 or 2 treatments. And like, that's insane. You know, someone who has gone through generations of addiction and still struggling, like I'm just like so confused as to why this information isn't being spread. And so for me personally, like I use cannabis every day. I'm off my medications for an entire year now. I used to take Wellbutrin, Zoloft, a mood balancer in between, and Ativan. And I don't have to take anything now. I use cannabis to eat. I'm recovering from an eating disorder. You know, I use cannabis to calm down my panic attacks. I use cannabis to sleep at night when I have insomnia. I use it to help me in sexual situations and lubes. I use it to help on my skin with my eczema. I use cannabis in so many incredible ways. And I just feel like the education just isn't fully out there. And I think that if my family, you know, like I'm the first person in my family to come out of addiction. Like I'm the first person, and I truly feel healed from it. And, you know, it's too bad in the sense that these things are not like cannabis is legal here, and there are psychedelic clinics now open in where the city that I live in, but doctors are still not fully prescribing these things. And so my family isn't interested or even able to get access to some of these things legally. And it's frustrating because, you know, I've seen my uncle go to rehab more than 15 times. You know, like I have members in my family who have been on methadone for, you know, 5 years and they're 17. You know,
Yeah.
it hurts me in my DNA to know that there are other things out there that are not being talked about or have even been hidden from us. So that's just kind of where I stand on things. And I just know, because I've been healed from them, and all I know is my experience. And do I think that it's for everyone? Absolutely not. Like, do I think it's, we all need to learn about it so that we can hold space for people that don't have access and should have access? Yeah, so that's kind of my story.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of cannabis, speaking as me personally and not on behalf of Soberocity, I definitely saw it really, really help my boyfriend's mother, who we unfortunately lost to breast cancer. But for her, she really, really wanted to treat her cancer in the most natural way possible. And when it came to pain management, because she had had a collapse of the T3 section of her spine, cannabis was really the only thing that helped her.
Yeah.
And with using the THC oil. So I definitely see how there's so many benefits for it, as well as just how the tide is really turning in terms of how medical professionals are viewing cannabis and the use of it medically. And we actually have a question from one of our attendees, Janice, who asks, directed at you, Kaitie, is psychedelic treatment for opioid addiction legal across Canada or just in certain provinces?
So technically, like mushrooms are still illegal in Canada. However, depending on where you are, there are exceptions and a lot of gray areas. For example, there was just a clinic that opened in Calgary for people who are dying to go and use psychedelics. There's actually a mushroom dispensary that is opened here in Vancouver where I live. There's actually 2 of them, and you just need to bring in a prescription or a doctor's note, and you can acquire mushrooms that way. But yeah, there's treatments in the Kootenays that you can go to that are specifically iboga treatments which are meant for getting people off of like heroin and methadone and hard drugs. And it's like a weekend thing. And these are people who have been addicted for double-digit years. I actually took a course through like the San Francisco Society of Psychedelics, and I got really emotional at this one point when they were speaking about pain management, because they talked about how they did a test, like Dr. Fadiman did a test as to whether mushrooms could help with pain management as much as opioids could. And they can, which is okay. So you can prescribe that, or you could prescribe this. The second test they did was whether or not mushrooms were addictive. And the answer is no, it's actually an addiction disruptor. So that's kind of infuriating to me, knowing that, you know, there's this thing that isn't addictive that can be created without a large price, but you don't need to take it all the time. And so it's confusing to me, you know, that so many people are struggling and we're being told, you know, to take these medications and, you know, to go to these treatment centers. And I just feel like not all the information is being shared.
Yeah, well, it's definitely safe to say that you got sober without AA and you found your own path. And I think that's absolutely incredible.
Thanks.
Jacob, do you want to share your story with us?
Totally. Yeah. Thank you, Kaitie. That was really, really cool to listen to, and really eye-opening. And I think, you know, this is I'm grateful to be here as a learning experience, as well as to, you know, to share my own experience. And I think probably in this conversation, I'm sort of representing a group of people who sort of needs to abstain from all mind-altering substances. I think that that's my role here. And so my personal journey with addiction started at 14. I was exposed to pot, and, you know, the older sister was doing it. She was with an older boyfriend who was doing it. I really, really looked up to the older kids. You know, it was like a perfect way to score coolness points, hang out with the older crowd and smoke pot. And I absolutely loved it. So I quickly started to, you know, I quickly started dealing, quickly started, you know, basically setting up a situation for myself where I could use cannabis every day. And I did so heavily for 6 years, basically, from the time I was 14 until I was so it was almost 20. And that period of time was definitely a period of addiction in my life. I didn't necessarily realize it at the time, but looking back, I see more and more clearly that I was medicating some pretty serious, pretty intense anxiety. And I was just totally covering it up. Like, I had no idea that that's what I was doing. To me, it was just like about partying and having fun. And weed is such an interesting plant because it is medicinal and it is beautiful in a way. And it was about love and sharing and connection. And that stuff was there, right? It wasn't like that wasn't like a lie or an illusion. That was all happening along with the use of cannabis. And so there was this beautiful side to it. It also became certainly an addiction. And so I used, every day, morning, noon, and night. Basically, nothing really felt good enough unless I was high. Nothing really sort of. It's like I had to get high for whatever I was gonna do. Whether it was going to the gym or going to school or and so that progressed and it did come along with um, other things. I started to do other substances. During that whole period of time, I explored psychedelics vastly, took a lot of different psychedelic substances, took large doses, and the addiction experience for me also because it was something that continuously a mind altering experience that I was coming back to again and again. And ultimately, I got to a point where I realized that I didn't actually have free. I couldn't not use weed and just feel okay and be okay. So I started to kind of get to a point where like this was consuming my lifestyle. I found myself partway through college and just putting a ton of time, energy into like the party scene, and some of the people that I was with and good friends with started to progress into your addictions to heroin and opioids and harder drugs. And I had some clarity for myself, luckily, that I didn't want to do some of those things, but it was the environment, stuff like that I started to do things I never planned on, never thought I would. Things like, crushing up an Adderall the night before and having it ready to on my bedside table so that I could wake up and have that before coffee. And I'm just like a stoner kid from the suburbs. Like I didn't plan on ever doing that, but it got to a point where I needed that to like get through my day in college and get my work done. So basically I reached a point where I realized like I couldn't really be who I wanted to be in the world. I couldn't fully pursue my truth, my ambitions, the contribution I make if I continued the behaviors that I was doing. And that whole time, like my core drug, like my drug of choice, was pot. And pot is a really interesting plant. Again, it was considered widely to be non-addictive for a long time. I think that's problematic belief. It's does have the potential to be addictive. There's studies that show addiction rates of about 9% and much higher, 25 to 50% if you used every day in your teenage years. So, I think that part of this, kind of like Kaitie was saying, is like we do it so that individual their own truth, their own path, and that education isn't available, put in front of us. And so, yeah, I think it's really important. For me, I needed to get clean. Help do that. Like, my rock bottom was basically reaching a point where I couldn't even enjoy cannabis anymore. Like, it was stressing me out. It's like I was kind of locked into it. I didn't have freedom. I couldn't be the person I wanted to be. So, getting off of that was a huge freedom for me. It allowed me to increase my motivation dramatically to do the things that my heart really did want to do, which was a lot of mountain climbing, adventure, a real passion for using outdoors as a means of active living, as a means of supporting mental health and recovery. And I got to progress towards those goals way more. I immediately went from, my grades in school skyrocketed with no other changes other than stopping my weed addiction and all altering substances. And, and then I think that from my background and my continued experience, and when I got sober, I was 19. So everything. And then I decided to try to drink responsibly, and experimenting with that, it was still an addiction for me. I got clean again, and now I've been for 4 years and almost 3 months. And for me, if I use a mind-altering substance, it absolutely opens a door that I don't have much control over, I would say I don't have the desire to open that door because of the difficulties that it unlocks for me. And so that's with anything, I say anything, like, I have my coffee every morning and all substance. So, the conversation continues to be an interesting one, but I know that there's people out there like myself for whom cannabis is certainly a slippery slope and a potential addiction, potentially harmful. And I want to say this about cannabis: if you are prone to addiction with it, it's extremely insidious. It can be a very insidious drug for the addict brain, because it doesn't necessarily create a rock bottom experience. Like, it doesn't lead you to necessarily crashing your car or hurting someone or having catastrophes in your life. What it can do is create a long, slow burn potential, not really being who you want to be, not really doing the things that matter to you. And, with the threat that I see it posed for me, and that I know it's posed for other people in my recovery circles, is threat of not living a fulfilling life and sort of staying stuck for long periods of time. And, you could live your whole life and reach whatever, who knows what percentage of your potential being a concept. But
can I ask some questions
yeah.
about your experience?
Sure.
So what type of cannabis were you using? Like, what type of strains and such?
Like indica or sativa kind of thing?
Yeah, so it really depends. Like from what I'm hearing from you is like you really may have misused cannabis. You may not have been educated properly on cannabis. You definitely use psychedelics in a really inappropriate way that can definitely encourage a lot of mental instability. So like from what I'm hearing is like, for me, for example, like I know I can't really smoke sativas because that causes paranoia, that can make me anxious, that won't help me sleep, and that won't help me eat. But if I didn't know that and I was just smoking anything and then weed was causing that in me, I would think weed is bad. But I know personally from experience and educating myself that if I smoke indicas, that will help me calm down, that will help me with my anxiety, and that will actually help me sleep. But it's all personal and different for everyone. So for example, like if you were taking if you were taking your depressive medication, someone gave you antidepressants, and that you knew you were feeling a certain way, so you decided you needed some antidepressants, but you didn't go to the doctor and you didn't educate yourself, and you just started taking antidepressants. And then it worked for a little bit, so you just started taking more, but you didn't really know how much you were taking or why you were taking it. And at the same time, you're mixing alcohol and you're mixing other drugs along with it. You're probably going to have like a really uncomfortable experience. But like someone like me, for example, I do not drink. I know what type of indicas, I know what type of weed I can use, and I know exactly what times of day to use them, and I'm using it appropriately. The experience that you experience, I definitely think can happen if you're doing it in the way that you're doing it. And I hope that, people who are using it to help in their recovery aren't using it in that way, because that will definitely stem that type of experience. As for the psychedelics, I definitely suggest using microdosing as a tool for mental health and recovery, as it acts as an addiction disruptor. But again, those are not macro doses or heroic experiences like you were saying. That's like 50 milligrams, and you shouldn't feel it at all. Especially, it comes down to education again. Like, psychedelics shouldn't be used if you are having a bipolar manic episode. Psychedelics shouldn't be used if you're on certain medications, or definitely if you're drinking alcohol. So it's like, if we educated people, like if you were at a young age and you had anxiety, like using cannabis would have been a good tool to help you if you were educated on how to do it and you went to a doctor and he prescribed it properly to you. Psychedelics could have also helped you in your mental health. Oh,
potentially. I think that those are all really good points. I think it's really important to get all the information out there. I also know that for me, like I had a long period of experimenting with cannabis and drugs, were different ways to make them work in my life. I certainly wasn't just diving in head first with no thought. What I most conscious approach that I could. I think experiences with psychedelics that were healing and eye-opening. And I also know that, at this point, thing that I take that is strong and heal, let's say, or mind-altering, including any strain of cannabis, would reopen the door to addictive patterns. And it's not, it's, again, this is my individual truth, is that, regardless that I had to use cannabis or what strains I tried to use or whether I use, I went through lots of iterations of trying to make it work. And no matter what.
CBD isn't psychoactive, right? Like, you can use, there's different cannabinoids in the plant that can be used for the same things besides THC and smoking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a really, and its medicinal properties as well. I actually haven't personally experimented with CBD.
Amazing.
It is interesting.
Yeah, it's amazing because it's non-psychoactive. Yeah. Like, you can, like, it's amazing for old people with like Alzheimer's or things like that, any sort of body pain. Like, for me, when I got sober, I was nervous. I didn't want to take anything for sleep, and I didn't want to take anything for the pain, because I have a holistic background in traditional Chinese medicine. So when I heard about CBD, the first thing I thought was, I was worried what the sober community would thought. So I just like hella educated myself on it and found like a dispensary here, and like actually did a training course through them, because I was like, just tell me about this. And then when I tried it, I was like, oh my gosh, like, how come I was offered these pain meds that are addictive over this that is not addictive,
Absolutely. Yeah, I would rather see CBD and cannabis used over opioids any day, anywhere possible. And I'm a huge advocate of that use and legalization. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a way in which I benefit personally from THC in cannabis or from mind-altering use of cannabis, regardless of the strain or the type, just because of the fact that it basically kind of altering practice makes me really want to go further in that direction. And that I've been able to find alternative pathways of healing without needing that, or the risks that it had for me aren't worth it. So that would be,
that's like a really good point to make. Is like, some people when they smoke weed, they feel triggered, but some people when they smoke weed, they feel the opposite. And I think like that's where like in Kaitie Sobriety, we just don't judge each other based on that. Like we're like, oh, does this help you stay off of heroin? Then fuck yeah, you should do that. You should do that, you know? Like if heroin's your problem, then please smoke this plant. But that's like, that's also like, I'm also not going to speak onto someone else's sobriety because I'm not in that body. Like, I don't know. And, you know, it's frustrating to me when I can find something that works for me and they're like, nah, you can't use that, or you can't use this word sober. And I'm like, well, then fucking screw the word because I feel better. You know, like, isn't the question should be, do you feel better? Not, can I use the word sober? You know?
Yeah. I think there's a conversation to have around the use of the term and like careful and conscious use of the term. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I don't think that's the main break of whether, you know, I think everybody does have to be responsible for their own journey and whether you use the term or not.
You know, like for me,
really...
when I started my company, I literally Googled the word sober. I was just like, sober. And the definition says only pertains to alcohol. So to say sober, it means to abstain from alcohol. But depending on what training you went to or what program you went to, you know, they have their own version and definition. So that's where the segregation begins. But, you know, then it also comes to the question like, well, then what is clean and sober? Is that not abstinence from drugs and abstinence from alcohol then? But then again, it's like, why are we arguing about the word? You know? Because it's I think you know what causes someone to relapse is like exclusion, lack of community, and judgment. So it's like what Sober Saturdays is, or like my community is like, if you are even thinking about being sober, or like if you were drunk yesterday, but you want some questions and have some, you know, like want to be here today, then I'm going to respect that because God knows I know, and I've seen in my family that I have yet to meet a struggling addict who can stop overnight. Unless they do yoga.
That there's I think there's the only concern that I would have about like the term Kaitie sober is to see it if it were to really catch on in, you know, addiction recovery spaces like treatment centers or in places, because there are places that consist of a lot of people that may need to find a path of complete abstinence.
Oh, for sure.
I think, you know, playing with the idea can be.
Like, for example.
Oh,
like,
absolutely. Yeah.
Like Kaitie sober doesn't have to include alcohol. Like when I hear Demi Lovato story, also Demi Lovato is not a sober coach. So the fact that like everyone's taking advice from her, I think is so funny. They're like, Demi Lovato said it on national television. I'm like, isn't she struggling? Why are we taking Demi Lovato's advice? She's not an expert in this field, but everyone suddenly is listening to her opinion. Like for me, Kaitie sobriety does not include alcohol whatsoever. But if drinking in moderation helps Demi Lovato stay off of heroin, I'm not going to freaking argue with her. And why the hell would she listen to my opinion? Because who the hell am I? You know? So it's like, for me, it's like, what's your biggest struggle? If you need abstinence, then I welcome that for you. You know what I mean? But I also respect that some people only have problems with certain things and they should be able to sit with us, you know, because there aren't groups for everyone. And some like, you know, AA didn't work for me. I watched my family go through it a million times and it didn't work for them. And so, you know, to be told that like, that's the only way to go about it. And I have to follow those rules when I'm over here, like, actually, I like to go to festivals, you know, I still want to go to bars. I don't want to be triggered. Like I want to feel healed, you know?
Now, do you think that Demi Lovato may have accidentally misspoken and just not fully understood?
Yeah, for sure.
California sober means.
Like to me, it seems like she has a form of harm reduction that's working for her. But the problem is the word harm reduction is scary for some sober groups, which is honestly, we just need to work on our language. Like we're all fighting for the same thing. Like we shouldn't be sitting here being like, well, you're doing that version, so you can't, you know, talk about it in this way. And this definition is this way. And it's like, do you need a hug? Do you need a hug? Because it sounds like you need a friggin' hug, you know? Like I'm over here like, this pandemic is hard, you know? Like I don't want to argue about those things. I want to make sure everyone's okay, you know? And it's like, it blows my mind that I've been talking about Kaitie sobriety, you know, for an entire year, yet one person can talk about it online. And since she's a celebrity who hasn't any idea or experience with it, and I have to have all these conversations with people who, you know, I've been trying to educate, you know?
Yeah.
And there's a
It
whole
is wild.
there's a whole group of people, sober people, who have been struggling alone because they don't fit into these categories, and they don't realize, you know, like you advocate for cannabis, but like the people and the groups that you're involved in, like we don't feel welcome there, but you would accept us if you knew we existed. So it's like we need to create space that holds all of us.
Mhm.
Thank you for
Yeah, I would love, before we jump into harm reduction, I want to give Jenna an opportunity to share her story with us. And then I will share a question from one of our attendees.
Oh, okay, thank you. So it's so interesting to hear everybody else's experience. So I grew up in New Orleans in the suburbs, and if you don't start drinking at 12 in New Orleans, like you're not from New Orleans. So that was always a thing. A lot of people I was exposed to weed. No, it's so interesting, Kaitie, what you're saying about it, because I've never had a problem with that. I got so paranoid, and people would be like, the cops aren't coming. And I'm like, no, it's not about the cops. I think these thoughts, like, I'm going to hell. Like, just these horrible thoughts, you know? Which is also why I've never done psychedelics. I'm like, wait, I'm sorry, I can't come down off that shit for 11 or 12 hours. Here's the shit out of me. So suffice to say, fast forward, just binge drinking, whatever, through college. I have a job in Washington, D.C. I'm playing soccer for rec league, and I got an injury, and I got prescribed hydrocodone, which was so amazing until it wasn't. I just couldn't get a high anymore. It was like, and also, and this is a whole other thing, but the whole economic thing, like, how do people get addicted to coke? Like, I just have never had that much money, and that was part of what happened with my hydrocodone. Well, first of all, I kind of woke up and was like, oh my god, I just married somebody, and the outlook is not good, and I can't get high anymore. Like, I take so many pills and it doesn't work. This, was before like they did this major crackdown. I was ordering online. I was ordering on pills and stuff, and it was like $500 a pop. I mean, I went through some money, and I was just like, not only can I not afford this anymore, I'm in this like messed up situation, messed up space. I had gotten over the mental addiction, and I was ready to be done. I tried to get sober on my own. Oh my gosh, my brother reminded me, it's an opiate. So it's like, those feelings you have when you're coming off of heroin, people and sweating and the vomiting and all that happened. So I had to go to a place where they could make me comfortable while I physically got off that. But I'm fascinated by everything you guys have said. That I feel like I don't know anything about anything anymore. It's just all this stuff that's out there.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your stories. One of our questions from our panelist, Janice, is directed towards Jacob. And she was wondering if you would say that your cannabis addiction, was it more physical or psychological, or a combination of the two?
I think it had both elements for me. It was definitely psychological. You might say more psychological because of the fact that, like, I didn't need any kind of like supervised treatment, right? I've never heard of anybody needing like any kind of like medically supervised treatment for coming off of weed, right? Like, but it was physical in the sense that like what's the difference between psychological and physical, right? When I was in my addiction, if I was to get to the nighttime and my routine is to use cannabis to just sort of be able to exist in a way that isn't painful, then that is physical as well as psychological. The psychological issue of anxiety is physically painful. And if I didn't have cannabis, that physical pain was like so amplified it was attached to the desire for cannabis. It was calmed by that, and you know, I did that because it worked physically and psychologically. It also had lots of repercussions, and prevented a healing journey that I feel was deeper for me after no longer relying on that.
And then we have a question from Tony, who remarks, California sober reminds me of a California stop, which is where a motorist runs a stop sign at a very slow speed. It is still a violation though. Just like California sober, it isn't really sober, which my question attached to that statement is, should sobriety be treated as a black and white issue? And that's to everybody on the panel.
In my opinion, absolutely not. I have never met one person like that can be put in one category or another. Every person's experiences and journeys and traumas and, you know, shadow work is all very personal.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't think it should be viewed black and white. In fact, I kind of think that in certain groups that you know, preach against black and white thinking in addiction, there tends to be a lot of black and white thinking going on about sobriety, which is paradoxical. So I think we need less black and white thinking.
I think just like less judgment and more like just hearing each other's story and where we're at. Like if someone's telling you like, I'm doing so much better than I was 6 months ago. And you're like, oh my gosh, how did you do that? You know what I mean? Like, I'm so proud of you for finding a modality that works for you.
Mm.
And then how do you feel about the statement of, well, recovery should just fit within the 12 steps? It's a one size fits all solution.
I think that's hilarious.
I think that it's important not to like, not to limit recovery. You know, we shouldn't limit recovery by associating it with only one program.
It was created by one man like so long ago, you know.
Right.
He even used psychedelics to help in his recovery. Like he talks about it often. Well, talked about it, I guess. But like, you know, we're constantly evolving as a species to use the same 12 steps for everyone, especially when like, you know, like laws are changing in certain aspects with certain things, is just old world thinking. It's not progressive.
And then we've thrown out the terms harm reduction and moderation. Should these be scary words? Should these be terms that we adapt into our recovery? And should California sober be used by everybody, or is this on just a case-by-case basis in your opinion?
Like, I think that there's a time and a place for those words. Like, do I think that someone who's been sober for, you know, 5 years should try moderation? No, absolutely not. Do I think someone who has been drinking a 2-6 every day for the last 10 years could try cutting back a bit before, you know, getting to the end where he cuts it out? Heck yes, because that's what worked for me. It took me three years to get to where I am, gradually not drinking, you know, taking 3 months off, binging for another 3 months, you know, taking 10 months off, you know, it's a process. And like, who am I to deny someone their journey? Especially, you know, for me, like I wasn't even trying to quit. Like I was like, I just want to change my relationship. I want to be able to say no. And so when someone comes to me with that, I don't say, well, you got to say yes to sobriety or you can't be here. I say, okay, let's try it. Damn well knowing that they're going to try sobriety and be like, oh man, this is awesome. Like, why wasn't I doing this before? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I think that it's important to like, oh, sorry, Jenna, were you going to say something?
I don't know what harm reduction is, but go ahead.
Oh yeah. Like harm reduction, in my opinion, is like reducing what you're using in order to get to a stage that is either what you're trying to get to or to straight abstinence. So like for me, like lots of my like clients or patients are like DJs or sex workers or people who are in the music scene and run festivals. So these people are not even sure if they really want to quit. They're just having a really hard time with alcohol. So I just introduce ways for different ways of them to think, you know, like maybe like if they realize that they drink, you know, in social settings because they're too scared to talk to people, I'll be like, okay, talk to 3 people first and then go get your drink. And then over time, it just gets to the point where they don't need the drink to do that thing. And so they stop doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's so important to treat sobriety like a so to treat let's say well-being as a spectrum, and sobriety as a part of that. I think there is a really important conversation to have around terminology and also around the way that we kind of look at different subsets of recovery. Like, you know, I actually think it's really important, kind of going back to the last question, to not speak out against, you know, like a 12-step modality. I've seen it help so many people, and it's free. It's everywhere. It's free. Show me one recovery resource that even compares to the accessibility of that. You can get a sponsor. There's volunteers available who will walk you through a pathway of recovery. I mean, I think it's so important not to bash it. I've also seen such different experiences of 12 steps. I've had them personally. When I started was going to a meeting in New York. There were like 7 people. It was a Narcotics Anonymous meeting. There were 7 people. It was beautiful. We all shared every time. Like, I felt super comfortable. I've been to other ones, like quite honestly, over here where I am now, like I've been in different 12-step environments that feel way different. Mm-hmm. Some of them are way, way more hardcore, like just kind of dogmatic, which I think can be harmful, honestly, sometimes. But I don't speak out against 12 steps in general. I think we need to go and look and find what works for us and take bits and pieces of, frankly, of lots of different things.
Yeah, I think like that's the main point, is that we shouldn't down talk anyone's version of sobriety. You know what I mean? Like, I can talk about my experience, and if it's not positive, I can talk my truth about that. But like, am I going to, you know, it's funny because I find like the AA community towards me, you know, is always trying to get me to see things their way. And I'm not trying to get anyone to see things my way. We talk often about like, we shouldn't bash AA, yet here we are being bashed by AA. You know, it's easy to come from one side and say, well, we should just all get along, when we're over here saying, yeah, we should, you know?
Yeah.
Well, we have a couple of interesting comments from Facebook. One of them is from Brandy, who says, California sober is sober. Everyone is addicted to someone. Weed got me off of hardcore drugs, and I can never imagine going back to that life. Also, I found my happiness, and weed just helps me understand who I am. I have no anxiety when I smoke. Some people can't get off their phones, so they're addicted. So you find balance so you feel normal. Weed is my balance. Also, I would much rather smoke some weed than take a Suboxone. And then we also have a couple of people sharing their sobriety dates. We have Kayla, who's 66 days sober today. We have Casey, who has been sober since February 8th, 2019. Her addiction was heroin. And then we have Matthew, who is celebrating 1 year and 1 month of being clean from heroin, I'm sorry, from meth. So those are all really great, really encouraging. Thank you so much, guys, for commenting. If anyone has any more questions, I'll be checking both the Zoom and the Facebook for them. Let me just check my little cheat sheet here. So what would you say are your non-negotiables in your recovery? So like, for example, I think for Jake, it would be to use moderation or to use pot. Like, do you have those parameters, Kaitie?
Yeah, like for me, like like in my sobriety, like obviously drinking is out of the question for me. You know, after like a 2 years in my harm reduction journey, you know, I was with some people that I've always wanted to party with, and I was like, maybe I could, you know, and they poured me a glass of champagne and I just like chugged it and was ready for another one. And I was like, oh, okay, not for you. So definitely alcohol, and then in hand with that goes cocaine. So those are my big things. But yeah, it's also funny just being here. Like my other thing is like my sobriety is not up for debate usually. I'm just like, no, you either get it or you don't.
Yeah. What about you, Jenna and Jacob?
Like non-negotiables in terms of things that
like your personal recovery. Like, you know, I would not do that. That would not be advice I would follow.
Gosh, I got to think about that. I'll let you answer, Jake, while I think about it.
Sure. Yeah, you know, the most psychoactive thing I'm willing to do right now is coffee, caffeine.
That's so funny. I won't do coffee.
And what's up? Oh yeah. Well, good, because it messes me up. Like it's something I'd actually like to quit.
I just got my boyfriend off if you want help.
It's something I'd actually like to quit. That is awesome. Yeah, because I mean, it's not actually good for anxiety. I love the feeling though in the morning. So I mean, so I don't. I wouldn't. So let's say this. Like a lot of people ask me about this too, because there is plant medicine available, and some people feel a calling to go into the jungle and do ayahuasca. And I don't know what that's like because I haven't done psychedelics in that context. I assume that it could be really, really powerful based on what I have experienced. But I wouldn't do that for myself simply because I don't feel a need to seek healing that way. I feel satisfied in the mind-altering healing experiences that I've had. And I just don't feel like I'd rather put my energy into like a summiting a mountain, and you know that's what really calls to me as a healing experience. So yeah,
I'm like all for ayahuasca. I'm like, get me to Peru, get me there.
Oh my gosh, yeah, for years I've been asking people because I'm like,
I've been studying it like nonstop because I'm like I have deep rooted trauma. Like I got generational DNA trauma that is not mine to carry around, that I am carrying around. And yeah, so when I first started reading about psychedelics, like ayahuasca was one of the first things I read about, and I was just like, sorry, what? But I totally hear where you're coming from.
Have you done it?
I haven't done it yet, no, because I want to take, like when I do it, I do want to do it. I want to do it from a proper shaman and a proper experience. So it's like all done by the right people.
Well, I speak Spanish, so I will go with you and interpret for free. But no, like seriously, because I still take I take antidepressants, anti-anxiety stuff. So a lot of people give me a hard time, family members especially, like, well, Jen, you know, you're still using, so to speak. But if I go off that stuff, like I get this low that it's just a really bad low, and I can't. I've tried to go off of
other things too, like if you're, I don't know what part of the world you're in, but like ketamine treatments are amazing for depression. Like I was reading, you can get ketamine transfusions that literally people who take their antidepressants every day don't have to take them for 6 months. You can get them in lozenges or inhalers, but usually like a doctor prescribes them. Here in Vancouver, there's a clinic called Change Pain, and they're a ketamine clinic.
I've been getting emails from, I'm like, did I sign up on some list?
And I'm like, telling you.
Okay, you know, I think you're right. Like, I'm gonna respond. I just figured, like, with my job that, like, I can't.
You should definitely read up on it. There's like there's so much information online about like Denmark, especially. They were like, pretty much like years ago when I was first reading about the legalization of ketamine for pain treatments and for mental health. It was in Denmark. That's when I first heard about the inhalers. And then it was just this year that I found out that there's a clinic here in the city I live in.
Wow. We have another question from Janice, who's wondering, is it true that you throw up a lot after drinking ayahuasca?
Ayahuasca.
Yeah.
So it's called purging, and it really depends on what your experience is. But lots of people do experience like throwing up or even like going to the bathroom, depending on like what you're needing to get rid of in your body at that time. Yeah, it's just part of the purge. It's like a very emotional experience.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I've heard you crap yourself, that you throw up, like everything in your body just comes out.
Like, yeah, like your traumas are just like at the forefront. Essentially, from my understanding, is like when you do ayahuasca, there's you go into this like space and your life is weighed on a scale to you, and like whatever you're supposed to like stop doing in order to like achieve a better life, it tells you right away. So like Joe Rogan actually has a podcast, I think, where he does it, and they told him to stop smoking weed, which is interesting. And I think it was Joe Rogan. But so there's like for me, when I heard about this, I was like, oh my God, if only my mom could try ayahuasca, you know, because she's had like, she doesn't know what's going on in her freaking life. And she's like so stressed out, and like, she's taking all these treatments and going to like prison and doing all these rehabs, and, you know, like it's not working. And I'm like, okay, is there anything else out there? Like, honestly, like I found psychedelics because I was desperate. You know what I mean? Like my family had been trying everything. And I only bring up psychedelics if you feel like something hasn't been working for you. And if you feel like your antidepressants and stuff haven't been working for you, like just start reading up on it and reading other people's cases, or like asking questions. There's so much information online. Like I don't suggest just jumping into it without like speaking to a professional or making sure that none of your medications cross with it. But like just start educating yourself. And if you find that you're interested or you have more questions, just like reach out to other professionals. There's so much science on the forefront right now.
And then just as like a general statement, not me the person, not a Soberocity, I mean, I personally do take antidepressants to manage my depression and my anxiety. And I don't think that because you're taking something that's prescribed by your doctor to manage your mental health and a chemical imbalance, that means that you're not sober anymore. I'm really sorry that somebody said that to you. I can imagine that
it's a constant battle.
so hurtful.
Well, and it's just like we're focusing on the word again, right?
Exactly. And that's the central theme tonight.
And it's just like coming from an egotistical place, right? Like a wanting to be right, a wanting to feel like a sense of belonging or a pride from where you're coming from and your definition. And it's like you can carry that pride, but you don't need to project it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, I think it's just important to tell, you know, to say like if you're just coming fresh out of addiction, it could be worth, you know, exploring non-psychoactive, non-chemical based routes. Or like if you're in treatment, you know, probably you might not want to throw yourself into a journey of exploring, you know, Cali sober right off the bat. You know, I think it's so important that all this to just be approached with caution and education.
Yeah, that's the big education.
Yeah, totally. And everybody has to do that for themselves, you know, because like you're going to have a Demi Lovato that goes on and says, I just watched that interview right before this again, and I was like, pretty sure she didn't do anything wrong. Like, how can we expect some...
Well, so many people have so many opinions, and I'm like, have you met her? Like, have you ever talked to her? How do you have such an opinion on her? Then you've never met her, and you don't know what she's going through. And like, you know, like when people so many people came to me after because of my Cali sobriety like outlook, and they're like, what do you think? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't follow her. I don't, you know, put my sober ideologies from her. Like, you know.
Yeah, we all have to be responsible for our interpretation.
Exactly. And we have another comment from one of our attendees, Lindsay. She says, my ayahuasca and 5-MeO DMT treatment was monumental in dealing with the root causes of my substance use disorder. And I think it's great that you've been able to find something that's been able to help you to gain your sobriety. I personally am of the belief that we shouldn't dictate what others do, and that if it leads you to sobriety, if it takes you out of a very dark place that you're in, that it's a personal decision that you and your medical team can make.
Totally. Like, yeah, Yeah, psychedelics have just changed my life. Like there is a part when you go through deep trauma as a child and you don't experience love or creativeness or a chance to explore your personality because you're in survival mode. When you become an adult, you don't know how to access those parts of yourself at all. And it stunts how you function as a human in this world and how you connect with other individuals. And for me, psychedelics connected me to that inner child that I could never, ever access, and connected me to different emotions and realizations about who I am and where I came from that have helped me create boundaries and a safe environment for myself as an adult.
That's right.
That's awesome. The fact that you survived the foster care system, like,
Dude, I
mad
aged
props.
out. I aged out. That happens.
Guys, I actually have to jump off, but like after you go to Peru, can you maybe come to Santa Cruz? We'll all go surfing and you can tell me how it was.
Yeah.
Oh, Jake, is there anything that you would like to plug or that you would like to bring attention to before you leave?
Sure, yeah, thank you. So I founded Natural Highs Recovery, which is a humble recovery movement that started with free trips and events with an outdoor adventure focus here in the Santa Cruz recovery community with people who are currently in treatment for addiction. So we're doing hiking trips and outdoor workout classes and free food. And so we're going to be expanding that and hopefully creating a large scale community where lots of these groups can function sort of grassroots. I also do one-on-one coaching and with a focus on living a happy, healthy, sober life. And let's see, you can find me at Natural Highs Recovery on Instagram. And you can find my website, naturalhighsrecovery.org.
That's awesome. And if you ever want to share or any of your events with Soberocity, let me know. We have a whole event submission portal where we highlight different sober events.
Yes, I'm planning rock climbing and camping in the Sierras and
That's awesome.
Big stuff coming. So, yay.
Well, thank you so much for being with us, and thank you to all of you for tuning in tonight. Be sure to follow Soberocity, Kaitie, Jake, and Jenna, and we will be posting updates on more panels like these. And please consider subscribing to our Patreon, patreon.com/thesoberocity, to support the programming of events just like the one you guys just watched. Our next panel will be hosted on Friday, May 7th at 7 p.m. EST and is our Sober Mom panel, Sobriety and Motherhood. For tickets, go to soberocity.ticketbud.com/sobriety and motherhood. Kaitie and Jenna, are there any final thoughts that you would like to share with everyone?
Yeah, if anyone has any questions about psychedelics or cannabis or just like how to integrate that or any questions about sourcing, just let me know.
I'm going to be hitting you up, so.
Yeah, I was like, Jenna, call me, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, guys. I'm going to end the chat, and hopefully we could all get together for another interesting discussion like this. We're looking into maybe doing a harm reduction panel, so I would love to have you back.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Good night, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.